What's up, guys? So while I got this third member out, I figured I'd take care of something that I probably should have taken care of earlier, but well. So the C10 Nats, we got a boatload of rain, and I got some surface rust here on my nodular cast iron housing, so I just need to paint this guy. One of the challenges that you get when you get these things fully assembled like this and they're not painted is what do you do to paint it? So I'm just gonna make a simple setup to set this thing so it's turned basically nose up, and then I'll tape off the pinion support and the seal, and then we'll prep the surface and go to town and just paint it the flat black that I'm usually painting everything else. So let's get to it, man. Show you guys how it's done. It's not too hard. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I'm just tracing out a mask that I'm going to use to help protect the gears while I'm painting. I use the gasket and trace the inside line of the gasket, and then I'm just cutting that shape out right now. Checked it against the gasket, and then I'm just going to set the differential on these two stacks of blocks that I made here out of just some 1-inch thick spacers I had laying around for another purpose. So simple as you just lay the mask over the blocks. The blocks are just spaced out, basically going to sit right next to the bearings on the third member. Drop it right in there, and then have yourself a good mask. And so here's what it looks like once it's sitting in the mask. And yeah, so ready to get working on this thing. So what I'm doing here is just using some brown Scotch-Brite and just going over the surface of the housing, getting all that light surface rust off of there. Also doing that on the pinion as well. Just trying to get it as clean as I can before I start getting into what I'll call the paint prep process, which is coming up. So I got most of the surface rust off, but I haven't taped it off yet. What I'm going to do, usually I like to do this before I tape and then after I tape, is use a little wax and grease cleaner to get all of the oil residue off this thing, since it was out of a working differential. It still is a working differential. It's got some oil on it, so we want to get that off before we paint it. So we'll do a round of wax and grease with before we tape, and then I'll tape it up, and then we'll do one final round, and in between then we'll use the air compressor to kind of blow stuff off as we go along, just to make sure we're trying to keep the surface clean. After the first round, start taping. Just got a few different sizes of taping, and it's just, you know, there's no special thing about taping. Just make sure you cover all the surfaces that you don't want any paint on. It's pretty much that simple. Another round of wax and grease remover before we get into paint. And the paint I'm using is this VHT epoxy chassis stuff. Works really well. Alright, so I usually give about 10 minutes flash time between each coat with this VHT stuff. Works out pretty well. And that was coat number 2, and I'm going to do a third coat and then we'll be done. Alright, so there she is. She's all painted up. Hopefully shouldn't have any more rust problems. So I showed you guys I use that VHT. It's actually the same stuff that I used on the bottom side of the cab on C10 CJ, and it's holding in pretty well. I mean, it's dirty because yeah, it's driving around in a bunch of rain, but that's like a little over 400 miles of wear and tear on, you know, riding close to the road. So it's looking pretty good under there. So that's the same paint. So hopefully it holds up well on the rear pumpkin. last piece of tape off, and there it is. It's done, all painted up and ready to go. Thanks guys for watching. We'll catch you next time.